Hello everyone and welcome to a very special Royal Automobile Club talk show highlights recording. In March last year we teamed up with the club to produce a series of talk shows, and one of the driving forces behind them was the club's late motoring secretary, Peter Fubister. Peter would always come and say hello before the recording started, wearing his usual cheeky grin and ready to chat about anything from the state of play in Formula One to that day's guest. We started with Ross Brawn and Nick Fry talking about the demise of Honda and the birth of Brawn GP in 2008. From then, we went on to talk to John McGuinness, Sir Stirling Moss, Alistair Caldwell, Damon Hill, Stuart Turner, Pat Symonds, and Dick Bennetts. What follows is a highlights show of all the best bits from those recordings. There'll be plenty more to come, but they will not be the same without Peter, who tragically passed away in November last year. Peter, these are dedicated to you. Thank you so much, and rest in peace. Over the run of the next 7 races, you won 6 of them, Vettel taking 1 win. There was then sort of a bit of dip in form, which we'll come to, but could you believe what was going on? I mean, you know, even when you look at some of the most successful years with Michael at Ferrari and, you know, the number of races he won, and looking at Hamilton at the moment, I mean, that's not even with the sort of the previous 4 months they'd had. I mean, Ross, you had so much experience of winning races and winning championships. I guess it was just business as usual once you got into it, or was it not? Did you just have to keep pinching yourself that this was?
Well, I think it was pretty special because of the circumstances that led up to it. I mean, the sort of extreme of emotions. It was a very special period. I think, you know, you win races because you've done a good job and perhaps other people have done a bad job, and that was a year where, quite frankly, a number of key teams, Ferrari, McLaren, they got it wrong. You know, they didn't get on top of the new regulations as quickly as or as well as they should have done, and so they all took, you know, half a year to get themselves sorted out. And so there was just this perfect storm in that we had a very good car, we'd got on top of the regulations, we've seen an interpretation that was good for us, we had a team that was buzzing because everyone had really worked so hard and so committed. 2 drivers who couldn't believe their luck, and they were really driving very well. So I mean, it was a perfect storm in our favour. Everyone else seemed to be off balance. We were on top of the job, and yeah, it was a pretty special first half of the year, and it's just this extremity of emotions that, as Nick said, we went from November, closes, you know, turn the lights off as you walk out the door, to you know, March time, April, beginning of the season, winning races. So it's very, very special.
I'm going to just move on to another couple of photos here. The Belgian Grand Prix, this I think in between Rubens's 2 wins that year. The second half of the year was much tougher. The reason why I've pulled these out is obviously Rubens' car on the left with fire extinguishers on it in the pit lane, and the McLaren mechanics helping again. And then Jensen out after a crash. I think it was very early in the Grand Prix, wasn't it? Was it first lap, if I'm not mistaken? How was there a dip in form, or was it other teams catching up? Was it Jensen stumbling a bit with the pressure of the World Championship? What can sort of explain the second half of the year? Was it lack of development, or?
I think you said it all, actually. I mean, there was lack of development because we didn't have the funding. And so, you know, there was some modest work going on, but there certainly wasn't the funding to really develop the car properly. I think you get these little blips anyway. And I'd been fortunate in having experience before, just knew we kept our head down and kept everyone focused, made sure that people didn't get too nervous about what was going on, then we could succeed. For sure, Jensen, I think, felt the pressure in the middle of the year. It was his championship to lose, and he had a few events, a few races that were pretty lackluster. He had a crash, but you know they're going to come. It's very rare, even in great years, that you have 15, 16, 17 races that all run perfectly. I know there have been occasions, but it's pretty rare. Normally you've got to be prepared, and I think with having experienced it, I was able to convey that to the team. Look, this is fabulous, but we've got to be prepared for when we have a bit of a dip or when we have a problem. Just keep working hard. Just focus on what you've been doing. You've proven you can do it, and then it will come out the other side. We did. I think we won Monza. You've got a list.
I've got some here actually. Valencia and Monza. Yeah, here we go.
Which was sort of, they were pretty vital later in the year to revive faith and confidence in the team.
And I don't think, if I remember rightly, no one believed that Rubens was fit enough to get to the end in Valencia, wasn't it? Do you remember, it was an incredibly hot day, wasn't it? And I think Jock Clear did the most wonderful job just kind of coaxing him through the last few laps, because I think Rubens was worn out by that stage. It was a boiling hot day, and Jock did a wonderful school teacher job keeping him going. But Rubens did a great job at the end of the year, and obviously Monza was special as well.
Yeah. So.
Was there a wry smile from you, Ross, with obviously your time at Ferrari and that coming at Monza, or did that not even cross your mind?
Well, Monza's a very special place to win a race. Very special for me. Very special for Rubens, because he'd been at Ferrari as well, and there's just huge passion at Monza. And I think because it was Rubens, and maybe because I'd been involved with Ferrari and left Ferrari and good terms of fans, were fantastic. Everyone. That was the nice thing about 2009. Everyone seemed to enjoy the success. It's a bit like Leicester City in the Premiership. Everyone just seemed to enjoy our success. We didn't have any real negativism from any of the, even the other teams, especially the working part of the teams. There may have been the odd team principal there who had a gripe with us, but I remember, I think. Was it one of the races where Rubens won? The whole pits, everybody's pit crew was out in the pits cheering him as he came through the pits, and that was a lot to do with Rubens. But I think, everyone enjoyed our success, certainly at working level, and everyone, it was a great story. So, but in that season, we had a little revival in the second half, which kept us going long enough to get the job done.
I'm just going to move on to one where we're running short of time. And there's sort of so much that we haven't covered, but I think this photo here is a great one of you with Jensen having just clinched the title. In terms of your career's work, both of you, I'll come to you, Nick, first. Where does this experience rate? Surely it's near, or if not the top. And then the same question to Ross as well, with your time at Bennetts and Ferrari, Brawn, and then Mercedes. Where is this?
It's clearly well up there. It was very different from things I'd experienced before. I'd been at Aston Martin for a long time, and rescued that a couple of times from pretty difficult situations. We had some great achievements at Ford in terms of some great products and what have you. But I think in terms of really taking something from the ashes, this was up there. And I think Ross has touched on it a couple of times. It was the relationship between everyone within the team. Jensen and I had gone back a long way, and there'd been lots and lots of hard times, and cajoling him along through 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008 was really tough work. And this was payback time, and it didn't matter whether you were a gearbox fitter, a driver. Everyone had great times, and everyone was really in it together. And we kind of walked the talk. We had no money whatsoever, as I've said before. And I remember at the Valencia Grand Prix, we won the race, and then Ross and I were in seats 34A and B at the back of an EasyJet flight to Luton with all the fans, and it was great. And we arrived back at Luton Airport at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and the fans on the plane couldn't believe it. It was like you guys were just winning the Grand Prix, and now you're with us.
How long did it take them to realise that they just sat down next to you two?
Oh, not well. We got mobbed in the airport because you're in the EasyJet queue. It was really good fun, as Nick said. It was fabulous time, and so everybody seemed to enjoy the success. And yeah, it wasn't intentional. I mean, if you wanted to structure a sort of a PR campaign, you'd send your executives off to travel EasyJet because that would look really cool. But that was necessity. It wasn't an intended strategy. But it was actually really good fun. I mean, we were riding a wave, and it was really good fun to get close to the fans, talk to the fans. They buy you a drink, or they want to buy you a drink. You have to be careful. Far too much to drink. But anyway, it was a really great experience, and all part of the whole thing.
I think what was the exciting bit was really a lot of stuff that people don't see, in that there was all this racing stuff going on, but through the year, we knew we couldn't continue like this. I mean, it wasn't going to continue like that. There were two relatively ordinary blokes who had inherited this Formula One team because there was no alternative, but what was going to come next? So running in parallel with all of this was, 2009's great, but there was a big risk that we were going to go bust, at the end of the 2009 season. And so, we had to find another solution. And obviously, as we did, better on the track, people became more attracted to the team. And, fortunate enough to have a few people who wanted to invest in the team. But, there were several stories running in parallel. And, towards the end, obviously the relationship with Mercedes-Benz, we managed to hit a home run with Petronas as sponsors. Obviously, a separate story there of the hiring of Michael, which started off, from what I remember, as a discussion in a nightclub, didn't it? Ross and I were dancing on the floor, and Michael was there, and it was, hey Ross, why don't you go and have a discussion with him, see if he fancies to go at this for next year? And of course he did. But there were so many things running. Absolutely, that's where the conversation started, wasn't it?
Absolutely amazing. So, finally, Ross, describe where does it? I mean, you had so much success at Ferrari with Michael, and success at Bennetts again with Michael, but your name was on the lid, as it were, with this one and all the experience. Does this outweigh them?
I mean, first of all, yeah, my name was on the car, which was mildly embarrassing, but actually I was extremely proud of. And it was the idea of the management team, Nick and the other people, in that we had a management group as well as the normal management, who had been the nucleus of the team surviving, and we were all shareholders, and we kicked around lots of names to the team, and eventually, I say to my mild embarrassment, but I was very proud of it, the others suggested we should call it Brawn GP, and so that was a great honour. And I think with everything else that went on, with the fact we rescued the team, the fact we won the championship with no money, the fact we then were able to acquire Mercedes as the investors and holders of the team, and the fact that's now gone on to such great success, I think one would have to say this is the pinnacle of my career, so far anyway. Who knows? But I have been lucky in having some very special times. The first Drivers' Championship for Ferrari for a long time. My relationship with Michael was very, very special, so I don't want to undermine that. But I say just all the events that surrounded this. If you'd said to me 18 months earlier, you're going to be owner of a team and you're going to win the World Championships, you'd say crazy. There was some books have been written, as you said, but also we had some approaches for films to be written, and it was this thing. Well, this script wouldn't be believed if it wasn't true, because it just couldn't happen. Couldn't happen that a team in those circumstances would win the World Championship. It would just seem to. It just seemed like a fantasy. So it was. That's a long way of saying yes. It was the pinnacle of my career.
What I wanted to do today is sort of wind back 20 years, because this year is your 20th anniversary of competing at the TT. It's an amazing figure. And I sat down and I tried to have a think about other sportsmen that have been at the top of their game for 20 years, because you have been at the front of the TT. And there's obviously Rossi in bikes, the likes of Fittipaldi, Mark Martin, Richard Petty, Brian Redman, probably a couple of footballists and maybe some cricketers, but doing a 5-day test isn't really the same as going around the TT. So going back to 96, what was it like going there for the first time, knowing you were actually going to be competing? Can you remember what the sort of apprehension? And
yeah, you know, it was an amazing journey, really. I could sit here probably for an hour and just talk about that one first TT. You know, I was doing some British Championship. I did the Northwest 200. It was the first road race I did in '94. But I was struggling as privateer. Didn't really have any budget to run anything. I was running on old tyres, old pistons, old brake pads, and you know, I always wanted to do the TT, but never knew how I would do it. But I wanted to do it properly at some stage, and you know, I was lucky. I got some sponsorship off Paul Bird, and you know, I got my first new bike, and I had all the tools with me, you know, and I thought, and we had a real successful Northwest 200. I was lying second in the race with Joey Dunlop and all these top riders, and I thought, I remember saying to Birdie, I said, do you fancy doing the TT? And he went, go on then. And it was just like that. I got a real late entry for it, and but I knew I always wanted to do it. But you know, I got off the ferry and I had nowhere to stop. I was stopping in my van, my empty box van basically, and it's a real good friend of mine who's not with us anymore, called Mick Lofthouse. He said, "Oh, you know, do the TT. You know, you'll be fine. You know, you're a smooth rider. You know, just come over and do it." And he said, "I'll meet you outside the hotel. I'm stopping in the Monaville Hotel." And so I pulled up outside the Monaville Hotel. The ferry docked at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I was laid on the front of the seats having a bit of a snooze. And Mick come out and said, "Oh, great, you're here. And I'll come in for a breakfast." And, you know, the Isle of Man community and everybody in the Isle of Man so friendly. They invited me in for breakfast, and then they ended up giving me a room in the hotel. So I had like a box room at the hotel. And I always wondered why Mick stopped there. You know, Mick Lofthouse stopped there. And I think he had to run across a landing at the night time and give the old landlady a bit of a servicing every now and again. I think that was part of the deal. So it was a few extras tied in there. But yeah, I mean, and I remember going on the start line, and he used to practice at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was 5:15, so you'd be up at 4 in the morning. You get your bike scrutineered. It was still dark at the time, and it was one of those 4 seasons not in one day. It was actually 4 seasons in one lap, because the lap's so big. It was a bit damp, and then it was wet, then it was windy, there was leaves on the track, then there was fog on the mountain, and there was quite low sun around Ramsey. So it's like, what am I doing involved in this? And you know, little Mick set off on his 125, off he disappeared. And you know, and it was really tough, because that year as well, on the last day of practice on the Friday, actually Mick crashed and was killed actually in practice. And it was, you know, I felt like at the time just loading up and going home. You know, this is not for me. And I thought, you know, the sun came out, and it had been a bad patchy week of practice, and then I thought, I'll do the race and see how I feel. And off we went. And you know, Joey Dunlop won the race. I finished 15th. I got the best newcomer award, and the rest is history, if you like. But yeah, it just got hold of me that year. And you know, but going back to when I was a kid, going with my dad, you know, 10 years old, watching the racing. My dad did a little bit of racing, and he wasn't a bad old racing, my dad, but he was too interested in drinking, fighting, and women. That was my dad's problem. But yeah, I mean, 96. I remember. I can just remember it so much, and there's lots of other things I remember from it, you know, as well. Some, you know, I remember seeing Mick Lofthouse helmet on the side of the road, and I thought, oh, Mick's broken down, and he hadn't. He'd crashed and stuff. So, but you know, it made me stronger, I suppose. And I came back the year after in '97 on my little Aprilia 250, and I stood on the podium for the first time with Joey Dunlop and Ian Locker, and you know, I came back in '98, Honda's 50th anniversary, and just I've ridden everything there. You know, 2-strokes, 4-strokes, singles, 250s, 125s, Ducatis, V-twins, and like I say, the rest is history, and I just can't get it out of my system yet.
You mentioned there, John, there was you know, Joey Dunlop won the race, and you were lying second to him at Northwest 200. What was it like, you know, with the likes of Joey Dunlop in front of you? I mean, you were, what, 25, I think, at the time?
Yeah, I was, and you know, it was funny. I was sort of really watching Joey, not watching where I was going, really. I thought, I shouldn't be here. That's the great man himself, you know, the most successful guy ever. And there was just something about him. I don't know what it was, but you know, the yellow helmet, the Honda leathers on, and you know, I was there slipstreaming him, passing him, and being alongside him, and whoa, you know, and it was really, really cool. It's amazing. I mean, you know, he was my hero, and you know, going back before that, I went to get his autograph. He was at the bottom of Bray Hill in a garage with like the Rothmans factory, RVF 750s and stuff, and I bought a picture from the shop and took it down. I said, "Would you sign this?" And I said to him, you know, I said, "I'm going to stand on the podium with you one day, Joey." And he sort of just went, "Hurry, hurry," and it was sort of difficult to understand at the best of times. I was like, and in 1997, I did achieve that. You know, I did stand on the podium with him, and I actually reminded him. I said, "Do you remember?" And he sort of said, "There's a few F's and stuff in there," and that was about it. He never remembered, but I remembered it well. And you know, I was such a happy bunny, sat up on the podium with him, and again, you know, we were rivals, and I got quite friendly with him, and I don't think many people did get sort of in behind Joe, you know, and get into him a little bit. But maybe I was young and I was asking him millions of questions and flat out, because I was his teammate in 2000, Joey's last ever teammate on the Vimto SP1 Hondas, and you know, I was a new boy. He was 48 years old, grey hair, specs on. He just didn't look like a racer, and that year he won 3 TTs, and you know, and whatever I've achieved, I'll never achieve what Joey achieved. You know, he won on a superbike, then jumped on a 125 and won on a 125. So, you know, if I jumped on a 125 now, it'd disappear up my. You know, there's just no way I could win on a 125. You know, so he was just so, you know, just so much talent. You know, and he was the same age as my dad, which made it really weird as well. So,
you sort of touched on that, asking him lots of questions. How useful were the older statesmen of the TT when you first arrived? Because it is, you always, you know, it's a track that obviously, Matt, you'll know better than me, but it's experience there that counts so much, and knowledge.
Yeah, if you can just get any sort of information off anybody at that level, you take it, you know, even if it makes a 1/10 of a second on one corner, it's definitely worth all the questions that you ask. But he never said a right lot, didn't Joe? You know, it sort of let you know he wasn't really ready to be talking, or then, you know, he'd sort of open up and buy a vodka and we'd be chatting away about all sorts of things. But yeah, there was lots of other riders as well. There was Ian Lockers, who won 7 TTs. There was Ian Duffus. There was Jim Moody. There was 8 times winner. There was Ian Simpson, 3 times winners. I was sort of the kid, just sort of asking the questions, and I used to sneak in the awnings and look at the bikes, and I'd be trying to look at what gearing they had on and what rear sprocket they had on, and there was all sorts of tricks going on. There were people would put a blob of silicone over the number on the sprocket so they couldn't see what gearing they had on. But it was all the things that went on, and all the trickery and skullduggery going on in the paddock. But I looked up to them guys, Joey, all them top runners, and I just wanted to be there. And you know, I served my time basically. You know, I went in '96 and chipped away, and it took 3 years for me to win my first TT. And then even then, when I won my first TT, I was all, you know, I'd be the one in the nightclub. I'd be up late. I wouldn't be prepared, eating the wrong food, no drinking stuff, you know, not water and stuff. And you know, I worked with other riders in the past, like Jim Moody. He whipped me into shape, got me in bed early, got me up, got me the first in line for practice and things like that. So all these riders, I massive respect for them, you know. And even now at 43, I'm still learning. You know, there's always something you can learn at the TT, because if it isn't the weather, the conditions, or a tyre, or the wind, or something, there's always something that will throw you a curveball at the TT.
I think I'm going to stoke the fire a little bit more, because...
Oh, that was another stitch-up. Well, I can tell you that story as well. That's another complete Ferrari stitch-up.
So, well, this is from William, and he says, "Hi, Lester, would you be able to recall the manner in which the keenly impartial Italian governing body handled the McLaren team over the Monza weekend of '76? And he finishes it with both barrels, mate.
Okay.
So
we to give a background to it, we had discovered that the fuel, we used 5-star fuel. That was the rules. You had to use 5-star fuel. And because we were low budget, unlike Ferraris, we just bought fuel wherever we were in the world. You know, if we went to Silverstone, we just stopped at a petrol station and filled the tank up on the truck with 5-star fuel, which was meant to be minimum 98, maximum of 101, octane. And so I, in my naive way, that's what we did. And we used to go to Austria, and Austria, the engine used to blow up a lot. Nearly all the teams would have engines bang. And the perceived wisdom was that there was a huge hill in Austria, and this long time on the full throttle was too much for the engines. But I thought, this can't be true, because we're at altitude already, so the engines aren't producing full power. They're not revving anymore, so it's, you know, it's not true. So it must be some other factor. And the only thing I could think of was we used this Austrian fuel, which was available in the paddock, 5-star. And so I took some of it back and gave it to Texaco, who are our sponsor, who didn't provide us with fuel. Would have if we'd asked, but we didn't bother. And they measured this fuel and said, oh, this fuel is rubbish. It meets the research figure, but its motor number is rubbish. So all fuel has, you know, octane, 2 octane ratings. One's called motor and one's called research. The motor is far more important because it's done by running an engine in a given conditions and seeing how much when it detonates. And this is what Benz invented this. He made an engine with a movable cylinder head, and he literally ran all the petrol he could find and turned the cylinder head down. He had numbers on the cylinder head, and when it knocked, because you could hear it, bang, 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 he said, oh, that fuel's 90, and this one's 80, and that one's 70. He could measure them with his engine, with his single cylinder engine. So he invented this motor number, which is far better than the research, because research is just burning the fuel in a retort and measuring the speed of the burning, but not this motor number. So I said to Texaco, well, we need better fuel, you know, can you make better fuel? Oh yes, so they actually shut down a refinery in Belgium and played with the knobs, which cost millions of dollars because they lost the whole day's output, played with the refinery because it's not an exact science, and built some fuel that had a motor number way, way higher in the 90s, almost the same as the research number. They made a tanker load of this fuel, put it to one side, and went back to making normal 5-star. So this is what we used, and this allowed us to actually change the compression ratio on the engine, raise the compression ratio on our engine a little bit, and we had pistons made by Mille in Germany, which were lighter than the Cosworth pistons. So our engine had an edge towards the end of '76, better fuel and better, slightly lighter pistons. So this was a good advantage. So because you can't keep many secrets in Formula One, this started to get, you know, read, and once again Ferraris with their PR system and their lawyers started to spread the story that McLarens ran illegal fuel. They did cartoons in the papers with people holding their noses, and you can't go near a McLaren because of the stink, and so on. So they engineered this bullshit again, and our fuel was illegal. But every race time we checked with Texaco. They would take a sample and run it through the test and say, yes, it's still, because we thought sitting in this tanker it might, you know, change, but no. And what the octane we decided on was 101.8, because the rule said the maximum octane was 101, and then in brackets, which was part of the rule, plus or minus 1% tolerance. So 101 plus 1% is 102.1. So our fuel was 101.8. So it was inside the rules. And we checked it every time, every race. And it was brought to the racetrack by a little Belgian guy in a little truck with 10 drums. And he made his own way to Monza or Spa or wherever he was going. Nothing to do with me. And he turned up at Monza, as he was meant to do, with his fuel. And we got the fuel and we used it. So we were doing this. And so Ferraris are doing all this publicity about the illegal fuel. And then with a great show on practice day, they came and took fuel samples from all the cars, you know, Ferraris, McLarens, all the cars, and went off with them. And then the next day they took fuel samples again, and off they went with them. Didn't say anything. They just took the fuel samples. Didn't tell us any results. By the way, it's quite quick to do. You know, if you have the right laboratory, it takes 5 minutes to do. And so, as a background to the story, just, cause I hope I'm not taking too long with this.
No, it's all great stuff.
I never left the racetrack. I always stayed with my mechanics until they went home, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, because there were decisions to make. I didn't work anymore, but I had a wonderful network because I went around and looked at what all the other cars were doing, because I could see what had broken in their cars, talk to their mechanics. I was able to go into all their garages, look inside their engines. Oh, I had all this fantastic feedback. Just like today.
Exactly
so I could go inside the Ferrari garage, because I was an ex-mechanic, and I knew exactly what they were all doing, you know, and talked their language, if you like. And we were always friendly with the mechanics, Ferrari mechanics. And Nicky on a mechanic level, we had a lot of fun with Ferraris. We used to take the mickey out of them, and they took the mickey out of ours. And Nicky used to come and visit us and check our cars out and talk to us, because his Italian wasn't perfect. His English was very good. Nicky speaks perfect vernacular English. He can do repartee in English. He can't in Italian, but he can in English. And so he used to enjoy. He used to spend a lot of time in our pit, more than he did in Ferraris. He'd have to trot back to Ferraris because practice was starting. Anyway, so I went home with the drivers and got taken out for dinner. I can tell another marvellous story about that. But just got taken out for dinner, and everybody was amazed. Here was I at dinner, and all the other team managers were coming and saying, "Oh, what are you doing here?" Blah blah blah, because I'd never been seen, at dinner in the restaurant. And we went to this posh restaurant down the road, and then we got back, and then the driver said, "Look, go to bed, get up in the morning, and come to work with us." So I said, "Okay, I'll pretend I'm a posh team manager, a bullshitting team manager as opposed to a practical one, and I'll go to work with you guys." So at 9 o'clock in the morning, we got to the racetrack, and I think the warm-up was at 10. And Monza has a big fence around it and big gates. It's physically, they're probably all like that now, but in those days they weren't. But Monza was definitely a barricade, because the Italians are so enthusiastic. They nearly need machine guns to keep them out. And so they had police on the gate. We got to the gate, and inside the gate were Ferrari personnel, and Piccinini, who was the Ferrari lawyer, was there inside the gate. I thought, what's that all about? So we opened the gates, went inside, the four of us, 2 drivers and Teddy and I, and they arrested me in Italian. Nobody would speak English. Piccinini had perfect English, but he wouldn't speak English. Nobody would speak English. They just arrested me, and they had a jail, and they took me and put me in the jail, and nobody would tell me why I was in jail. The other 3 had to go to work, because they had to go and get the cars ready to do the warm-up. So whilst I was in jail, Teddy was taken up before the stewards of the meeting and said, "Your cars have been using illegal fuel. Your fuel is 101.8 octane, and the rule is 101, and your practice times don't qualify, so all your practice times are void. You'll have to drain your cars, fill your cars up with the fuel that's provided for the circuit by Agip, and you race with that fuel, and you'll have to start in the back of the grid." Meanwhile, I'd managed to get a sympathetic Italian journalist to say, "Why am I in jail?" And they said, "Oh, because they say that you smuggled the fuel into Italy." And Ferraris had made this up. It's a brilliant story. So I was in jail for smuggling. And so I had to get somebody to go to the hotel, because the little truck driver didn't like Grand Prix racing, the little Belgian guy that bought the fuel. And they had to go to the hotel and find him, and he was there, fortunately. He hadn't gone shopping or sightseeing or anything, and got him back to the racetrack with all the paperwork, which was locked in his truck, and show them how the fuel had been imported into Italy, paid the duty, blah, blah, blah. So they had to let me out. So I went off to the stewards, obviously, immediately, and said, "We've been railroaded." And they said, because they said, "Why is that?" I said, "Because it says plus or minus 1%, so the 101.8 is legal." And they said, "Oh, actually, yes, you're right." They knew this all along. They said, oh dear, yes, we've made a mistake. But the stewards of the meeting's decision cannot be changed. It's still that way. So they had made this decree, and that was it. So we started on the back row of the grid. We got railroaded. Our fuel was perfectly legal. Texaco were going to cause a huge fuss, and then decided not to, because that would just get more publicity for it, and only people would remember would be Texaco illegal. They wouldn't remember Texaco illegal being exonerated. So the FIA and the Ferrari sent us a telex on Monday morning saying, "Oh, we're terribly sorry, we made a mistake." And that was the end of it. But we got stuffed by the Ferrari very successfully. And Teddy, of course, didn't pick up on the 101.8 thing, which he should have instantly. So we got on the back of the grid, and James was making his way up through the grid, and they got punted off by Welshman Price, and into the sand barrier, and walked home. The crowd spat on him and threw things at him. Then he and I got in the car with his girlfriend and I, and the crowd tried to turn the car over. In the roads out of the circuit, the crowd got hold of the car and tried to turn it over, but they didn't succeed. I just held it at valve bounce, so every time it touched the ground, it shot forward. It ran over a few, but didn't injure anybody really.
It's amazing, hearing about the '76 season, because it is just the most incredible season in F1.
It was all the way through. Yeah. There wasn't a dull moment.
Now, moving on to the Mille Miglia, you first tackled this in Jaguar XK120.
Yeah.
What were your initial? I mean, obviously you would have known about the race, but what was your original? What were your first recollections of actually
you must realise that at that time we were developing disc brakes, and I was with Norman Jewis, and we were purely working on the brakes. And we read this thing, my gosh, there's a race up there in Italy. Well, why don't we go and enter it and just see how we do? And I suppose we had to call the factory and ask Lossley, England. Anyway, they agreed, and went in. And to me, that was a very frightening race. I must say that because I didn't know the circuit, and there's no way that you could do 1,000 miles knowing the circuit, other than if you have, which I did, Dennis Jenks beside me with a rolling map thing that we call toilet roll, and I think it was about 27 meters long. And on there we'd place down all sorts of notes, so that when we're coming up a hill, I'd know Jenks would give me a signal like slow down or flat out and so on. So he had the whole lot in his hands, and amazing really, because he had to obviously be looking down like this, and with the G loads and so on. Of course, poor chap was sick quite often, and he luckily the other way. But and then you've got problems like I said to him, look, I don't know, it's going to be very difficult. We've got to have a stop to have a slash. So we tried out the best way of doing that, and stopped. But then I said, but look, there's no way we can stop on the thing. When we get to Rome, which is where the first control was, when we get there, we'll do it there. Well, when we come into Rome, they put up 75,000 grandstand seats. So I had to go across behind something, have a quick pee, and came back, and it took me 1 minute 4 seconds, which wasn't bad.
So when you first went there, you were just driving blind then, when you first went?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when we first went there and started, we didn't know anything other than, that we're going down to Rome we knew the route, obviously, because that was fixed, but no more than that.
But it was pretty relaxed. I mean, when he went in 1952 in Norman, he drove the car out there, didn't he?
Yes, well, exactly.
I mean, you're more famous, obviously, for driving a German taxi to victory in '55, but which, in fact, there's a picture behind me on the wall, and I'm trying to remember, is that the Raticosa or the Futa Pass? You tell a story about how you had to do it in less than an hour at some astonishing average.
That's right. There was a Futa, I think.
Right.
And we wanted to do it in less than an hour, which was quite difficult, which I think we managed to do, actually.
I was lucky enough last year to come out to the Futa Pass and have a ride in a 300 SLR, and Sterling, you were there with sort of doing onboard shots and things. And what surprised me was just how relentless that pass is. It's corner after corner after corner after corner. And you always described the 300 SLR as a very sophisticated, smooth car, and how lovely it was to drive over a long distance. But when I got into it, it wasn't sophisticated and smooth at all compared to modern machinery. I think people don't appreciate just how sort of raw these cars were, and the noise, and I obviously couldn't get down behind the windscreen being 6
but
or
I
7,
mean,
but
when you're racing, you use the steering wheel just to present the car to the corner. Then you use the throttle to virtually to steer it. And the 300 SLR was a staggering car. I mean, really well. I mean, we were doing speeds up to 180. I mean, the one which I think was probably the most interesting one, the last Cremona to Brescia is 135 k's, and on that we averaged 165 miles an hour, I think it was.
There's a lovely bit of period film, isn't there, of you overtaking the plane?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, but planes weren't that fast then.
Yeah, the planes. You can see this silver bullet going down this straight road, and it's just going right into the distance.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. You mentioned earlier, Sterling, that it was one race that really scared you.
Yeah.
Why did you keep going back?
Well, because it's the most exhilarating, exciting race anywhere in the world, and it just, to me, I mean, I'm a racing driver. And to take part in an event like that one, I think is really just pushing the limits about as far as you can.
But you always did it with a co-driver, whereas your great chum Fangio, he would never take a co-driver with him.
No, but the reason he wouldn't take a driver is he had a crash in Argentina, and his co-driver was killed. And so he said, look, he would never take somebody else's, never put them in that danger.
Ah.
Yeah, apparently.
And because obviously Fangio finishing second in 55. In your opinion, that was, I mean, without a co-driver, that must have been an impressive feat.
Oh, I think it's staggering. Really, I mean, it amazes me because Fangio certainly was faster in Formula One than myself, but I could usually beat him in sports car racing. I don't know why. I asked him, I said, look, why aren't you faster in sports cars? And in sports cars, yeah. And he said, because he likes to see the front wheels. I mean, which seems to me an amazing thing to say, but he liked to be able to see his front wheels. Yeah.
How do you feel now about the way the Williams episode ended?
Well, it seems to have been a kind of comedy of errors by the time you unpick it all. It's a good chapter in it, actually, in my book.
Is that
Damon, why didn't you tell us where people can buy this and how much it is? Because I think we should get this all out in the open.
By costing £30.
There's actually a lot of people have referred to your book, so you've got certainly some future purchases right here.
I mean, there's conjecture. I don't have the full picture. I have an idea of what happened, and I have some background knowledge to what might have happened as well. But I think that it's possible that Frank regrets the decision, and that it didn't turn out the way they wanted it to. But I think that it affected my attitude towards our sport quite badly, and I think I became slightly cynical about. Well, I thought the sport was cynical. And so I think that changed my approach to the way we run things in F1. I mean, I worked on the presumption that if I did well enough in '96, then I would have earned my right to keep my job in F1.
Winning the World Championship should do it.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
You'd think that would at least be able to stay and have another go after that. But it doesn't work like that.
When did you first know for sure? Because I mean, I know the story broke. Hockenheim, Andrew Benson did a bit in Autosport, and the place went haywire. But when did you actually find out for definite that you were? I
found out when I read Autosport. Well, if you can call that finding it out.
But you had no clue before that came out.
I assumed I'd taken the view that this was just sensationalism, and I thought, well, maybe there's. And it was only a gradual process of finding out that actually there was some truth to it, and that happened between Germany and then eventually at Monza. Before Monza, I was told. And so I had to go, I'm still fighting for the World Championship, and I had to go to the race knowing I'd lost my job. It's quite humiliating. It's quite upsetting, especially when you've got your teammate there who's fighting for the World Championship as well, and he's keeping his job for next year. It's a bit...
that must have... You must have had to dig exceptionally deep to deal with these.
That's what the test is. It's not whether you can drive. It's how you cope with all the other stuff. There's lots of people who can drive. But it's about these other trials and tests you get put through in the sport. And I was learning fast. I'd come into Formula One, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed at 93. And I went through quite a lot in a very short space of time. And so, when you read about Formula One from the outside, and you see Mansell's unhappy about this, or Piquet's unhappy about that, and Alan Jones wants to put an axe in the back of, of Reutemann's, shoulder blades, and you think, what is going on in this sport? What is the matter? And it's only when you get in there you realise how it can happen. There's a lot of politics and a lot of pushing and shoving that goes on.
But how did you actually deal with those last few races of the season, knowing what you now knew? And how did you cope? What did you do?
You can only do what you can. There's some things you can affect, and there's some things you can't affect. You can't worry about the stuff you can't affect. It's done. There's nothing you can do. So you just go, right, I have got a contract that, as far as I know, I can turn up to race. They'll give me a car to race, so I'm going to race the car. You turn up, you race the car, and you just do the best you can. That's the only thing you can do.
Well, all the politics of F1, part of the reason why when you left, it was like turning off a light switch. There was no, I might go and do DTM, I might go and do... It was
no, because, I'd lost my dad when I was 15. My dad just retired. And we were looking forward to, happy times in the future. I've got 4 children. I'd been through the risks of Formula One. So when I stopped, I wasn't going to do something silly. I just made that a rule. I was going to, stay away from all of those temptations. And so I had my full of that. You can't really do it half-heartedly either. You can't go into it and go, I'll do a bit of this. But it's not how you're built. You have to win. You have to do the best. So the moment you get into race is this pressure that comes from within you to perform 100%. And if you don't want to put yourself through that mangle if you're going to get beaten up by a bunch of 22-year-olds in DTM or something like that because you don't care. What I've done, I'm not going to do it. So there's that element too. You're not getting faster as a 40-year-old.
You mentioned the Mini there, and obviously a large part of your career was and success was alongside this Mini and with the Mini. People obviously they didn't take to it straight away, did they? Because it was so different to things that came before.
Drivers I approached to take a Mini who'd been driving a Healey thought it was a demotion. And if somebody had got to go into Abingdon, nearly a mile from the workshop, take the Mini, can't I take a Healey? It was not seen as the glamorous thing it was. But we forget the timing for that car, the Beatles, Carnaby Street, the 50s, late 50s. The country was coming out of the war. It was where we were free. The timing could not have been better. It just caught on. And Paddy's first win, we were on the Sunday night of the London Palladium, which got, I think, 3 times the number of viewing figures that Strictly Come Dancing gets, with the Rolling Stones and Tommy Cooper. It was just perfect timing.
It was
lucky timing.
Yeah, well, as you say, it was such a wonderful time, especially for rallying.
Yeah.
But I was wondering, could you sort of paint us a picture of what rallying was like in the 60s? Because I think a lot of viewers and listeners will, fans of rallying, and they'll watch the likes of Loeb and whoever it is rallying nowadays, or well, not so much Loeb anymore. But it's it's a different sport compared to what it was in the 60s. Because I've got a quote from you here, actually. The first international rally you did with John contained endless zigzags to ensure that no Michelin Guide recommendations were missed en route. It's very different to what it's like nowadays.
Well, for instance, if you want to make old rally drivers cry, just say one word: Liège. This was the thing that started in Belgium, went down to Bulgaria, and was 96 hours with 1 hour break. 96 hours is 4 days and 4 nights. 1 hour break, not per day, 1 hour over the 96 hours. Pat Moss won it one year with Anne, and they said that they were hallucinating. They were seeing burning lorries. There weren't any burning lorries. I did with John Sprenzel in a Sprite. We won our class, I think. 96 hours in a Sprite. I wanted a midwife when I got out of the car there, not a bloody mechanic. It was amazing. But the sort of event, to give you an example, if there were 2 sections, if there was a long section with a hill at each end but a flat piece of road in the middle, well, that's not a problem. You start there, do the hill, go like hell across the valley. They neutralised the middle bit, so you got 2 hill climbs. So everybody lost time on the 2 hills from that section to that section. And the other thing they did, the organiser, I think his aim was to have 1 finisher. I think he got down to 9. But he had a table for the police showing A to B, 2 hours, B to D, B to C, 2, whatever. Those are the official hours, Mr. Chief Constable. On the other side, which they didn't show to the police, they had the opening times of the controls. So you say I've got 5 sections of 2 hours, so you should reach the 5th control 10 hours after you've started. Fine, do that, but that control closed 9.5 hours after the start. Police don't know that, so unless you were aware of this sneaky double timing system, you got chucked out of the rally. And the final event, the organiser said, with tears in his eyes, I can still see him at this drivers' meeting, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really upset. The police have insisted we put in secret speed checks to stop you speeding. And then he held up a card with the location of the secret speed checks written on them while we wrote them down. Can you imagine the spirit, why people are nostalgic about an event like that? The Alpine was a massive thing covering all the major French passes. The Monty had got the extra glamour. He started from Minsk, you're starting from Athens, he's starting from Aberdeen or Swindon or whatever. Will he be able to get through the snow? There's all that excitement. There wasn't television. You got Raymond Baxter, 10 o'clock or whatever it was every night, talking about it. And more important, the thing that you got then, and you don't have now, you got it on the front page of the national papers. So it was part of the general consciousness. If there's a World Rally Championship today, you're very lucky to find it in any national paper. And if it's more than one line, you're really lucky. So it's all of that put together. It was quite a glamorous time. So it helped the Mini along. I don't know whether you're covering it later, but it was also the reason why BMC folded, but perhaps we can talk about that later.
There's actually another question here from Chris. You've reached high levels of success in both singles heaters and the British Touring Car Championship. Which category do you look back? I mean, obviously you're still very much involved in the British Touring Car Championship, but which period do you look back on most fondly? Is it F3?
F3 enjoyment-wise was great when the particular year with Mika in 1990, Philip Morris Marlborough tasked us with going to Europe to do 3 races because they had internal budgetary debates going on. Why are you giving this money to the UK when you're not allowed to carry the word Marlborough? We had to cover up. So the chap in charge of him, Graham Bogle, said, well, we believe that the British F3's top championship and WSR is a good team. So they gave us money to go and do 3 European rounds to see how we compared against the Europeans. So we did Imola, we did Hockenheim, and we're supposed to do one in France. We did Imola first. We had to switch from our Avon tyres to Michelin's. We're only allowed 10 tyres for the whole weekend, so we used them very carefully. We worked out a strategy. The Italians were against 42 cars. 40 of them were Delaras, mainly with Alfa engines. So we arrived with a Honda in it, Mugen Honda. So we're the odd ones out. Mika and I and the other engineer, we drove around in a hire car, went around, did a few laps. What sort of downforce? Where do we start? So let's go, oh, that's a fast corner, that's slow. Let's long straight, let's go medium downforce. Because we could compare it to like Snetterton to Silverstone Grand Prix track. So we started off and then got into qualifying. We qualified first and then using 1 set of tyres. Then the Italians panicked because we went P1. They all run no downforce. You've got to be quick down the straight. But for qualifying, you don't. You want to get around the corners. Yeah. So they all start cranking wing on because they'd seen our car. Chattarella, I think it was, Mika panicked a bit. I said, don't worry. I said, they're now using their second set of tyres in second qualifying. We are only going to go out, we're going to sit here, sit tight, be confident, and we're not going to use our second set. We'll keep them for Sunday's race. So we went out, scrubbed them only, come in, took them off. Sat there with no wheels on the car in the pit lane. We still had our spare pair left. And he stayed P1, and right at the end of Q2, we got pipped for P2 on the grid. So, okay, we're front row, no problem. Sunday morning warm-up, we put on our other pair of new ones, and we blitzed everyone on the warm-up, so they even got more panicky. So if you work out the strategy, we had a new set just scrubbed for the race, the Italians didn't, and we'd put on our spare pair on the left or right side, I can't remember, and we blitzed them in the warm-ups, and they were just all shaking their head then. How can this team come to a new track, this Relt car with a Honda engine, we've all got Dallara Alphas. So then they picked on us in scrutineering. Your seat belts are illegal. Your fire bottles not legal. So they had our car pulled apart for about 3 or 4 hours. And luckily the Italian route agent was there. He come and helped us out with the translation, the English to Italian. And eventually they conceded that it was legal. They were just trying to find something. So we went into the race. Mika won it comfortably. But they kept on putting a red flag. Lap 1, Mika come round in the lead, red flag. I said to Mika, what's the problem? He said, it's just a car spun. Shouldn't be a red flag. Okay. I said, maybe come round in second place, they won't red flag. Restart again, he comes round leading, another red flag. I said, what's happened this time? He said, just as another car spun off. Third time lucky, we got going, and he won the race comfortably. So, tick in the box from Philip Morris. Went to Hockenheim, Michael Schumacher. We'd never been to Hockenheim. We'd had some advice from a team, what gear ratios. They tucked us up big time. Gear ratios are miles out. We had to change gears. The car was far too stiff for the chicanes, the old Hockenheim. Had a misfire on the engine as well. So we were panicking. Friday night, we were about P22 out of it, 28 cars. Some German journalists come down, oh, you British champions are supposed to be good. I said, yeah, we're okay. We have a few little issues to sort out. Gear ratios, misfires, cars too stiff. So we softened it round. I was on the phone back to Neil Brown's in England about the engine, because we had no engine guy there. We couldn't afford it. We had a spare car there, the Leighton House car. We had that there. We took every electrical component off it we could think of. The tail light, everything was changed. We've got to fix this misfire. We changed all the springs set up round, changed damper settings, changed the ratios. Went out on Saturday morning, old tyres. He come round, thumbs up, misfire was fixed, chassis much better. Came in, meantime Schumacher's sitting there, arms folded because he's on pole, but second qualifying still got about 20 minutes to go. Said to Mika, car, he said, much better over the chicanes, gearing's much better, misfire's gone, give me the new tyres. Put the new tyres on, bang, pole. Schumacher then went out, couldn't get near us.
Very satisfying.
So, yeah, very satisfying. We won the race again. The Marlborough guy was there. He said, I want you to come across the start line before Schumacher comes out the stadium onto the start. I said, well, tall order, Graham, but we'll do our bit. And Mika did it. We crossed the line about 5 seconds ahead of Schumacher. So we won that one. So this was winning the fight, the internal Philip Morris battle about budgets. And then I said, right, I think it was Manny Core, the third round. But Philip Morris said, don't bother doing it. You don't have to do it now. We'll still give you the money. You've proved enough. And that was it. So we were very happy with our F3. That was a good, fun exercise. The touring cars are more challenging engineering-wise because you have to do a lot more. Now we're into design and building our own cars. That's a good, I love the technical challenge there.
Yeah.
Even though the rules are much tighter than the super touring, there's still certain areas.
So there is still scope for innovation and engineering.
Yeah, not as
excellence.
much, but it's, you know, you can play with certain areas. So, yeah, I enjoyed F3 in that sort of circumstance. We enjoyed going to Macau in '83 with Senna. Won that. No one had been there. That was fantastic. Switching tyres. We beat everyone else. Japanese, German, Italian, French F3, British F3. Everyone came together for the first time. So that was a very happy late Sunday night finishing.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. Simon mentioned that Le Mans and World Endurance Championship, and obviously there's lots of different ways to get to the same solution, you know, to get to the same checkered flag. Formula One has obviously been the topic of a budget cap and trying to keep costs in check has come up time and time again. But the World Endurance Championship seems to manage that to a certain level. Why can't Formula One manage a similar model? Why?
You know, I think it could if the willing was there. I think it's quite impressive. With the WEC cars, they went to a hybridization program at pretty well the same time as us, without so much publicity around it. But actually, it was very interesting because it was a much more open set of rules. And of course, we saw quite different solutions from Toyota and Audi and Porsche, and I think that was a really good thing, because they had got the equivalents about right. You know, Toyota, Audi, Porsche, who was going to win? You didn't know. There wasn't a sort of walkover. And they did seem to get that equivalence correct. Now, in Formula One, we didn't actually even look at any form of equivalence. So there's a very, very prescriptive set of rules for the power unit. And Article 5 now, together with some of the technical directives that discuss how you control the electronics, etc., really do lead you to one design of engine. I mean, it very clearly leads you to a V6. It has clear cylinder dimensions, etc., etc. And so you're not going to get that diversity that you had in Le Mans. I think it's great, the diversity in Le Mans. I think the whole encouragement that Le Mans gives to innovation is fabulous. In Formula One, we're very, very nervous of it, I think. I guess the trouble is that we are so commercial. Is there a manufacturer out there who has the courage to go a different way? And I'm not sure there is.
It's fascinating stuff. Pat, something we worked out actually yesterday, I think this is your 8th motorsport podcast. It goes some way to there's, I think, a couple of other people have been in twice, but it goes in some way to how well you've actually. I think that's almost more podcasts than you've done, Simon.
Must show
and I've done.
Must mean I have very little to do, I guess.
No, it goes some way to explaining just how good you are at explaining very technical issues in a way that even I can understand, which is quite a challenge. I want to talk a little bit about this year and Williams' performance and what you're thinking about for next year. I just wanted to touch on Ross Brawn and the talk of him taking over the sort of the future direction of the sport, because that's exactly what we've just been talking about. Apparently it is agreed, but obviously the sale of Formula One needs to go through, which it hasn't yet. If this happens, good thing for Formula One, having someone like Ross on board to helping direction of the sport?
Absolutely, and I think, you know, just a few minutes ago we were talking about what's wrong with Formula One and the rule-making process, the knee-jerk reactions, the lack of research, etc. But I think this is an excellent first step, but I do think it's a first step. Ross is a really good guy. I worked with him for a long while, immense respect for him. You know, he's a good thinker, he's logical, he's not scared to form opinions, he's not scared to fight for his opinions, but I don't think he can do it alone, and I really think what we need to do is set up something rather like the technical working group, but it needs to be separated from the teams. Now, by all means, listen to the teams, get opinions. There's nothing wrong with that, particularly in sporting matters. But you must have a level of impartiality, and you need to have people who you can trust. You know, it's like government, isn't it? Do we really want a referendum for everything that's going on? You know, we don't seem to have done very well in this country already with that way of government, and yet in Formula One we have a referendum every few weeks about what are we going to do about qualifying, what are we going to do about this regulation, that regulation. It's not the way forward. Get good people in there, fund them, because, you know, we need to do research. We're talking about overtaking. The reason no one knows is because the work hasn't been done. Throw some money at it, put it in a wind tunnel. You know, you can go over to Toyota in Germany and hire one of their wind tunnels. You can put together a program, and you can start to understand what really matters, and then you'll improve the sport. So I think Ross coming in is a great thing, but I hope that it's not just in isolation, because, you know, there are a lot of people who do know what's going on, and we had a great example at the beginning of this year, which I hope people have forgotten about, but the qualifying.
It seems like a distant memory now, actually.
It does, and
in a good way.
It's best left as a distant memory, but it was so sad, because when that was proposed through the strategy group, and the minute it came to the teams, you know, we looked at it for about 15 minutes and said, okay, well, this is what will happen. You know, it was very obvious. There would be no cars running at the end of each qualifying session. It didn't take a brain surgeon to figure it out, and yet no one listened. So what you need is, I'm not advocating that the teams produce the rules, but you need people who have operational acumen, who know how you go racing, who know how you exploit rules, who read a set of rules and say, right, this is how we get the best out of it. And Ross is good at that. Ross has been exploiting the rules for as long as I have. So, yeah.
I hope you enjoyed all of that as much as we did when we were making them. As I said at the beginning, we have loads more recordings to come at the club's wonderful base down at Woodcote Park. I look forward to seeing you all when we go there. Bye-bye for now.